Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to this live discussion and artist talk. Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Syrus Marcus Ware, and I'll be giving a live artist talk today, exploring my work and my practice in this format, in an Instagram live format. So thank you so much for joining, and thanks for tuning in. Hello, everybody. There'll be an opportunity at the end to be able to take questions, and we can have a discussion. I'm so looking forward to it. So I'll get started. I'm actually here in Toronto, also known as Toronto in Canada. This is Three Fires territory. The land that I'm on is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum. This area is also covered by Treaty 13. The part that I'm in Toronto is actually the part that was underwater at the time of the Toronto Purchase, making this particular area unceded territory, the land of the Mississaugas of the Credit. So just to say, it's an honor to get to come to you from these lands. This area was home to some great peacekeeping systems, including the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Dish with One Spoon Wampum, as I mentioned. So it's an honor to get to be here, and I take the responsibility to support land back movements and Indigenous resurgence all over Turtle Island, but in particular from my location here in Northern Turtle Island, or Canada. So I'm going to show you a little bit about my work and my practice, and talk to you a little bit about how I do what I do. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. So my name is Syrus. I'm a Black, trans, mad, and disabled artist, activist, and scholar. I work in a variety of different mediums to try to explore Black activist culture. I'm just kind of fascinated in change making and this idea that we could work together to change the world. We're definitely in a revolutionary moment right now. Revolution is not a one-time event, it's a process, and we're in one right now. And so I've been sort of documenting and archiving and chronicling what is happening within activism in my community. One of the projects that I wanted to talk about first is a project called the Activist Portrait Series. And for this project, I've been creating large-scale portraits of activists in my community, as a way of documenting and celebrating their organizing and their activism. So these portraits are really large. They're sort of 12 feet tall by 3 to 5 feet, or sometimes 6 feet wide. And they're drawn in a sort of super realism as a way to render these often invisibilized lives visible. You know, activists are doing all of this unseen work in our communities, and often don't get recognized and supported for their labor. Activist burnout is a real thing, and I wanted to create these beautiful celebrations of their labor and their activism. This is activist Queen Titi Opaleki, who organized out of Winnipeg, Treaty 3, and also here in Toronto, organizing around disability justice in their communities. So these portraits are a way of taking the frame that we put around kings and popes and sort of, you know, the most powerful in our society, and instead puts the frame around people who I think are really deserving of this support and love, and that is activists in our communities. Portraiture literally is implicated in deciding who and what we consider inherently valuable. And so by putting the frame around activists, and in particular around Black queer and trans organizers and BIPOC organizers. It's an opportunity to reinsert us into history, to document activism and create an archive in the now. It's an opportunity to also showcase Black joy. I mean, here we have portraits of Tandy Young and Kona, Nubian Imp, based out of the West Coast, and Tandy based here in Toronto. Just in their moment and in their joy. So to create these portraits, I often ask questions and interview the activists that I'm photographing. I've interviewed 45 activists through this project, and I ask them questions about their organizing, about how they got involved and how they became an activist. And it's kind of not a boring question, but it does something, and it makes their faces do these particular things while I'm asking them. And then I ask them a speculative fiction question. I ask them if they could travel to any point in human history and get involved in a social movement or a moment of activism, where would they go and when would they go and why? And they get to sort of dream up and talk about if they would, go back to the March on Washington, or go back, or go to the future to see how things turn out. And then lastly, I ask them if they can describe for me in words the feeling that they get when they first realize that they're falling in love. And then their faces kind of do all these dramatic things. And I take photographs and photographs and photographs and photographs. And then I draw these portraits from photographs. So this is the Activist Portrait Series, and it grew out of my interest as an activist in documenting and supporting activists' lives. I had been doing a project called Activist Love Letters since 2012, where I got a bunch of strangers to write love letters to activists in their communities, and I mailed thousands of letters to activists all over the world. And it was such an incredible experience to get to be in touch with all of these activists, to be creating networks of care around organizers and in the north part of Turtle Island, to be creating support networks for these people who are putting their lives on the line, on the front lines, was really a powerful project. And I wanted to get to know the activists I was writing to a little bit better, which is why I started drawing them. And again, larger than life. I had initially, when I first started as an artist, I actually worked in painting and would do these sort of large paintings. This is a portrait of my aunt in Memphis, which is where I'm from, in curlers. I think she said to me, you're when I took the photo, you're not going to show this to anybody. And then I was like, no. And then I asked her later, I said, actually, can I draw it? And she let me. So anyways, this was a portrait that I made way back when, maybe 2004, 2005. So it's definitely an oldie from when I used to have a painting practice. But when I started doing the Activist Portrait Series, I was really interested in working with drawing and working with this limited palette of the sort of black and white graphite. It's just graphite on paper. And again, as I say, these are really larger than life. As you can see, this is Queen Titiopalaki in front of her portrait. And Queen Titiopalaki is a very tall person. And you can see the portrait is significantly larger. So the Activist Portrait Series has been something that I've been working on since 2014, and it's been really an amazing experience to get to meet these activists, to get to draw them larger than life. And one of the things that I was really interested in was the ways that we could potentially use these portraits to transform our environments. They're so large, and I was like, I wonder what would happen if I made a wall full of portraits. And so I started actually playing with this idea of creating a wallpaper, an activist wallpaper. And so I started working with the portraits and turning them into toile-like wallpaper that this is a portrait I drew of George Jackson, Soledad brother, Minister of Defense for the Black Panther Party in the prison that he was in. And I turned it into this repeated pattern, this 12 wallpaper. This is an example of one panel of some new wallpaper installed at the Leonard Baird Gallery in Montreal that featured portraits of Dr. Omisire Dryden, organizer and activist based out of Halifax, and Kim Nkuru, an organizer based currently in Montreal. There's also this repeated image that I had drawn of Rodney DeVerlis dancing. And so as installed wallpaper, these wallpapers create an alternative environment. In these environments, Black people are liberated, Black people are free, Black people are, in a different zone. So I wondered what would happen if we started our day with images of activists and change makers, with images of Black joy. What if that's what we were looking at when we were eating our toast, instead of looking at what is a normal kind of wallpaper, toile wallpaper, which is sort of these portraits of rich white people on swings kind of in the countryside doing bucolic things. And so the wallpaper was an opportunity for me to create an alternative environment, one in which we were free. I also work in textiles a lot, again, trying to explore and consider activist culture and activist creation. This idea of an activist aesthetic. I've been an organizer for 25 years, and I've been an artist for 25 years. So to me, my artistic practice and my activism are definitely interconnected. So I was really interested in working with textiles. I often make banners for activist movements, and I was very fascinated by what happens within activism around the banner making, and how it's particularly it's kind of a feminized labor that a lot of women and trans people do in the movement, labor that is not always recognized or supported as the valuable contribution that it is. It literally ties the march together, it ties the press conference together, it's the backdrop, it can help us to take and take over a street by blocking cars. The banners become these essential parts of our activism, but they're often done sort of in the middle of the night before the rally, often by women and trans people after they've done all of the other things, like get the kids to bed and do all of this other work. So I was very interested in what it might mean to share the skills of sewing and banner making with a broader community, to redistribute a sense of equality around who is doing what labor in our organizing. So targeting some workshops that were just sort of intentionally ambiguous in their description, like come learn training sessions for freedom fighters. I invited people to come and explore training sessions for freedom fighters. And some people might have imagined that you were going to learn like hand-to-hand combat training or something like that. But instead, what I was getting people to learn was how to sew the banners. So to learn this other essential skill in activism, but something that is often discounted because it is feminized labor and comes from a feminized methodology. So these are folks sewing the banners that we ended up creating, and these are some of the banners that were created, often drawing on messages from Black revolutionaries, like this message from Nat King Cole, that was came from a statement that he made when he was being attacked, actually, for going on stage in a white theater when he was playing a mixed bill, and they threw things at him and yelled at him, and he said, he went to the mic and said, "Some people are just afraid of the dark," and then he walked off stage, which was quite a bold move considering he was contractually obliged to continue performing despite the abuse, and he instead left. And then, of course, Octavia Butler's Take Root Amongst the Stars, and then there's some banners here dedicated to folks who have lost their life because of police violence that were also created as part of this series. This is a banner I made as part of a workshop series in Sydney, Australia for Sydney Fest that was about about now, about this moment of climate change, this moment of systems collapse. And so these banners are these beautiful kind of textile objects that get created through a collaborative process, but they're also used in practice. So this banner was used in a performance, but also as part of a march against Invasion Day in Australia in support of Indigenous people and Indigenous communities. So sewing and banner making is so essential to the movement, and it's a skill that I had, and I wanted to think through what's a creative way of addressing labor politics in our organizing and the ways that it's often not distributed in an equal way. And so using a creative method that I love to use, I created these workshops that redistributed labor across a variety of different experiences. So it wasn't just women and trans people sewing the banners until 4 a.m. and then coming to the rally really tired, and everyone else being kind of freshly slept and ready to go for the cameras or whatever. So it was a process of doing that. I'm also really interested in my practice in speculative fiction. So Walida Imarisha, writing in the book Octavia's Brood, that Adrienne Marie Brown and Leah Lakshmi Piepsnia co-edited. In that book, Walida Imarisha talks about how all activism is speculative fiction because we're daring to dream that another world is possible. And so I've been very interested in using speculative fiction in my work as a way of daring to imagine that another world is possible, right? That something else is a possibility for us. So I created a series of projects that aimed at exploring futurities. And one of them was this project. It was a play that I wrote called Emmet. And it's actually going to be airing on CBC Gem for the next year, starting this Friday. But it's part of the 21 Black Futures program that Obsidian Theatre, which is a Black theater company here in Toronto, and CBC Arts put together. For this project, I'm working with the incredible director Tanisha Tate and the actor Prince Mpansa, and I'm getting to tell a story about a near future where we meet Medgar, who is living his life on the edge of the newly formed Great Ontario Sea that is caused by climate change, and is this newly formed sea when Lake Ontario swells and floods, and the Humber and Don River around Toronto flood and create this massive waterway. And he's living on the edge of a waterway in a world plagued by viruses where every day is largely the same. And we meet him on a day when everything changes. And so he's been living the same for years, since a major virus wipes out the majority of the Earth's population. But we meet him on a day when everything changes. So I'm just going to play a short clip for you here.
It's been 7 years exactly since the fall. I normally spend today remembering the past, honoring our dead, and marveling that I somehow survived. I do it alone, It feels private somehow. I mean, I guess we do everything alone now. I like to light candles. I normally do the same things on this day as I remember. But this year, everything is different. Today is not about the past. It's about the future.
So that is just a taste of this play, Emmet, and it's going to be playing as part of 21 Black Futures for the next year. And I'm really excited about it because it tells of an imagined world where Medgar Evers and Emmett Till are somehow refigured or reimagined or recreated in a future where they get to not only live, but they get to become beloveds. And so it's also this love story about the love between Medgar and Emmett. So I'm really excited for that to come out, and I'm very drawn to this idea of creating these speculative futures, these other worlds. Another project that I did that was commissioned for the Toronto Biennal was a project called Antarctica. And for this project, I basically had been doing some reading about the continent. And I found out that it has been divided. This is an artistic rendering that I made of the way that Antarctica has been divided up into potential future colonies. There have been, I found out doing my research that there have been 11 people born in Antarctica, 10 of them sent there to be born to stake future land claims, which I found fascinating and kind of terrifying. Would human beings never realize that colonization is the problem and that we should stop doing it? So I got to tell the story about climate change, about white supremacy, and about a future world in 2025 when these Antarcticans actually get sent home to set up future colonies. So I worked with actor Yusuf Kadura, Dainty Smith, and Raven Wings to embody these three BIPOC Antarcticans, and they were basically sent to Antarctica to set up a colony, and Sabian, the main character, played by Raven Wings, is this black trans woman who's already an activist before she goes to Antarctica, and she tries to convince the others to instead, go and try to set up and try to find some sense of freedom, and to get away from the company that is encouraging them to colonize this place. So Antarctica was both an installation, a series of drawings, and a 38-minute play that was all performed inside this immersive installation. It was really important to me that people be able to engage with the set and the environment, so people could go into the installation at any point. It was open to the public. You could sit at the table. You could lie on the beds. You could pick up the rations, Antarctica rations. You could, play with the tea kettle on the stove. Like, you could do anything with the actual material as if you were inside this environment. And then you could also sit in and amongst the set to watch the play and the performance. The script for Antarctica is being published right now. A part of it was published in About Place Journal, and it'll be published in full in a new book that Jessica Watkins is writing about disability theater in Canada. Right now, a portion of the installation is on display at the Never Apart Gallery in Montreal. And it's sort of, everything in the installation is white, referencing white supremacy, but also the snow and the coldness of Antarctica. It has these drawings. It has these textile works that were created in collaboration with Merlin Hargraves. It has a film that was created in collaboration with Michelle Lau, and then all of these Antarctic rations and all of these materials that they would have had with them as part of their setup. So Antarctica is coming back to the Toronto Biennal for 2021, and I'll be creating an installation that tells the story about what happens after the three Antarcticans escape to the free territory in Antarctica and try to set up a free area for future activists to come to. So I'm really excited about looking at that and exploring that as a potential semi-autonomous zone in the city where we could try out practices of abolition and world building that could be ultimately actually useful in creating our future worlds. I created a project called Ancestors Do You Read Us as a companion to Antarctica. And Ancestors Do You Read Us is a multi-channel video work. It's got 8 channels, and it was created again for the Biennial and the Ryerson Image Wall, and it tells a story that's a little bit of a more distant future. It tells a story of 2072, where our great-great-grandchildren have figured out a way to use old technology to patch through into the Ryerson Image Wall to give us a message from the future, a message of hope, a message of possibility, but also very explicit directions about what they need us to do in order to save their future. In order for them to have sort of a glorious and free future, they need us to do these particular things. So the video was installed here at the Ryerson Image Wall. First, it's been since shown in other places. It's currently on display at Willabali Art Projects in Vancouver and also at Never Apart Gallery in Montreal. But it really appeared as if our great-grandchildren had patched into this media wall to give us a message. So this is the installation at Never Apart. So you can see there's sort of found footage that's incorporated in, as well as contemporary footage as our ancestors glitch through time zones trying to reach us in the now. So I want to show you just a little clip just to give you a taste of Ancestors Do You Read Us. I'll try to get this queued up well so you can see it.
Do you read me?
Do you read me?
Can you read us?
Can you
copy?
read us? Can you copy?
Do you read us?
Wow, can you read me? We are your great-grandchildren, and we have a message for you.
The scene is really gone crazy out here right now.
Do you read us? Can you copy?
So that is just a taste of Ancestors Do You Read Us. It's about 4 minutes, and it explores this other world where Black and Indigenous people have survived, and therefore necessarily we know everybody has survived. It tells of a disabled future. It tells of a future that is intergenerational. It tells of a future where we have made it. We have survived the Black Death spectacle that is writ large on the news every day, where we have survived and supported, overthrowing capitalism and colonialism and solved climate change, and we have become so much freer. So this project is sort of a potential hope into an alternative future. I often like to write and tell stories as part of my practice. So I was invited to create a short story that was responding to Ancestors Do You Read Us. So in Ancestors Do You Read Us, our ancestors, our great-grandchildren come back to us, their ancestors, and they tell us that we need to overthrow capitalism, we need to end white supremacy, we need to solve climate change. They want to thank us, they love us, and they want to encourage us to keep going. So I wrote a story for Folda magazine that brings together this narrative of Ancestors Do You Read Us and tells you what happens right after they send the message. And I'm just going to read a portion of it for you now. So it's 2072. We have just successfully completed our message to the past. It took 3 years to figure out how to use this technology to communicate through time and space, and now we finally have. We told our ancestors in 2019 what they needed to hear in the now, in their now, to fight back, to overthrow capitalism, to save Black lives, to bring about our glorious and free future. We are their great-grandchildren. In their time, it was late 2019. We didn't tell them about the virus yet. It wasn't time. But we wanted to make sure that they were ready to fight, ready to organize, ready to build new communities from the ashes of the old, which no longer served them. We know the virus will hit them hard, about a year after they receive our message. They will have to isolate, to withdraw, and to go inward at first. We know from our timeline that the fires of change were already burning by that point and that the revolution was igniting. in the 3 or 4 months into the virus, more and more Black and Indigenous people will be killed by their archaic police force. We know now that this was the final push needed to finally defund the police system and further still to end policing once and for all. 16 months into the virus, the seeds have been planted for an abolitionist world, one without prisons and police, a world where we take care of each other. People started to put into practice that which had been tried in activist communities for decades: transformative justice circles, abolitionist strategies, campaigns to decriminalize drugs, sex work, and madness. People organized. The prison doors were open. People got to come home to their communities, and we kept each other safe. 18 months after the virus, the stock market crashed for good. No amount of money could be pumped into it to keep it going. With little finances and resources left due to the recession, eventually it forced the masses to realize that it was time for change. The stock crash began a wave of collapses in the capitalist system. Activists fought and mobilized the people. We took back our time, our lifetimes, from the capitalist regime that was sucking us dry. Because of the virus, people had a sense of what their lives could be like without capitalism. And with the introduction of a universal basic income in the 29th month of the virus, after the brutal second, third, and fourth wave of the virus, people had the security to start using their time differently, to get involved in shaping change in their communities. It was like our ancestors had told it was like Octavia Butler had told our ancestors, all that you touch, you change, and all that you change changes you. By the end of 2020, her words were ringing truer than ever. Our ancestors were realizing what was possible. They touched change. Our ancestors began to shape the changes happening in their world. By 2025, they had built strong networks of care. They cried out together, abolition now, Black Lives Matter, end colonialism, freedom for all people, including poor people, trans people, disabled people, drug users, and everyone else on the margins. And our ancestors, our beautiful and wise ancestors, they did all this work and labor for us. They tried to save the planet from the ravages of the Anthropocene, of anti-Blackness and white supremacy, of ableism and saneism. They fought for justice so that we could get to thrive and be free. And oh, what a freedom we have now. 5 decades after the waves of change, after the virus, after the end of policing. In 2072, we are living in the free. Our days are spent in circle, in community. We take care of each other. We have healed the earth and lived largely off of major power grids. Our city parks grew into forests and grew until they reconnected with each other all across Turtle Island. Wide swaths of forest spanning the continent. The trees are finally back in communication with each other. And 3 years ago, when we found this cache of old technology, we knew it could help us reach them. We closed the circle and used it to patch through to the past, to tell our ancestors thank you. Thank you for fighting for all of us. Tonight we will celebrate, to gather for our nightly rituals, this time with a special spark. We've done it. We've got the message through. It's time. Their time, our time, then and now. It's time to be free. So that was a story that I wrote about Ancestors Do You Read Us. If you want to see the full video of Ancestors Do You Read Us, you can see the 8-channel video as a single channel on my website, syrusmarcusware.com, and you can check it out there. And you can also check out this story at the Folda magazine. I think it's folda.ca. So that just kind of gives you a sense of how I also like to bring and move across disciplines. So what you've been looking at in the background here while I've been talking are photographs that are remnants from a project that I did called BAD, or Black Ass Dinner. That was a project that I did that now seems like such a memory in this moment of isolation. But it was done in late 2019 when we could still gather. And the project was a simple idea. I wanted to combine performance, photography, and self-determination. So I invited a bunch of Black artists, dancers, singers to come to my house for a dinner. I wanted to make visible the creative spaces that happen when we gather and when we create work together and when we just are socializing and kikiing and spending our time together. So I invited these artists, Raven Wings, Jazz Fairy J, Rodney DeVerlis, Janine Carrington, to come over for a dinner. And the only ask that I had was that they had to document the dinner from their own perspective with 5 images from the night. So each of them had a chance to pick which images they wanted documented, and that together would create our collective memory, our collective experience of what had happened at the dinner. So these are some of the images that were co-created by us, and then they were printed in all of these different sizes. So some of them are small like this and sort of document these moments of conversation, of storytelling, of personal sort of documenting and reflection. They sort of are in different sizes. But the project also had some very large scale outputs. So these large portraits, and they were installed for the Art Gallery of Burlington queer art show that was put together for the fall of 2019. And I grouped all of these images, and again, just this opportunity to show Black, queer, and trans joy, to make visible a little bit about what happens when we actually gather and get to share space. I mean, little did I know how essential documenting what it was like to be in space together, what it was like to share an environment, to share food together in this moment when we can't gather. It just seems like looking at these images, bring up a lot of feelings and memories. Like, look at us being so close to each other. Look at us, sharing food from the same fork sometimes as we tasted each other's food and just did all of the stuff that you kind of can't imagine doing in the now. So that project was called BAD, Black Ass Dinner, and it was an opportunity to co-create with some beloveds, with some artists that I really wanted to just share space with, and I wanted to make visible what happens in these private spaces, so outside of the public. What is queer joy and what is trans joy and what does our practice look like? Maybe I'll end off there and see if anybody has any questions. But I will just draw your attention. I put a couple of books here to look at. As I mentioned, I am an artist. I am an activist. But I'm also a scholar, so I like writing. I like drawing. This is a children's book I made with Catherine Hernandez that tells the story of all of these different kinds of families that Catherine wrote, and that I illustrated, and that sort of document all of these beautiful different configurations of our families. As this child is sort of trying to delay her bedtime, she's asking about all of the families of the kids that she knows, and all of the different experiences. So this was kind of a fun book to make, and I like working intergenerationally and making things for kids as well as for grown-ups. This is a book that I co-edited in collaboration with Rodney DeVerlis and Sadney Hudson through my work with Black Lives Matter Canada and Black Lives Matter Toronto, and it tells the story of Black organizing in Northern Toronto Island or in Canada, and it's quite a fun read. And this book is one of 2 that I created about queer and trans space-making practices and archives through the Marvelous Ground Collective run by Dr. Jin Harita Warren. And, telling the story about queer and trans archives and space-making. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a sense of my practice all over. I like to work across a lot of different mediums. I like to be multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary in my approach. And yeah, I'm really excited about what is coming up as we move into this new reality. So the play Emmett is an exciting opportunity to say, okay, well, what could theater or performance practice look like in this online world? So we created theater, but we filmed it. So it's going to be, again, airing starting on February 19th. But just thinking through how creative practice is going to look as we go into this period. I know I'm going to continue drawing. I'm going to continue creating and reimagining it for this different platform, thinking about how to make work for online. I mean, as a disability justice activist, as a disabled and mad person, I'm very committed to creating beautiful, compelling, rigorous work online that makes it that all of us get to see these experiences of theater or drawing or performance or whatever, because for so many of us this pandemic is only just part of our everyday. We already weren't going out. We already weren't necessarily engaging with the outside public because of a variety of things related to systemic ableism and saneism. So needing to have online space and online content and online information is so essential, and hopefully will continue long after the pandemic is resolved. So anyways, I will stop talking there. We have about 20 minutes. If anybody has any questions or anybody wants to ask anything about my practice, or oh great, Black Crip and Moments by Lori, are you still here? I would love to have you join Black Crip. Let's see. Anyways, yes, if you have any questions, let me know. I love having these images of gathering and images of this opportunity to sort of be together in a gathering. It's so lovely. If there aren't a lot of questions, I do have one more project I could show you, but I'll just see. And also Black Crip and Lori, if you're still here, Moments by Lori, and you want to ask a question, just message me again and I'll add you to the chat. But I will just tell you about one more project. This project called Radical Love that I got to do this year for the Bentway in Toronto. And the idea for this project was they were doing a project about safety in public space, and they wanted to commission new works that responded to this idea of safety in public space. And I, as an activist who's been engaged on the front lines of all of 2020, I was compelled to thinking about monuments, about how all these monuments were being taken down or splattered or sometimes literally thrown into the river. And I was interested in thinking about what it would mean to create a monument to Black, queer, and trans presence in Toronto. What would it mean to create a monument to Black trans women and to non-binary Black and Afro-Indigenous people? And so I created a project called Radical Love that was designed to do just that. It was a monument that was literally a beacon of light that would shine in the night, because I had heard from the trans people that I spoke to that a lot of them felt safer walking at night at 2 a.m. than at 2 p.m. because there was less risk of running into people, so less risk of transphobic violence. So I created these monuments that would also glow in the day, that would be these celebrations of Black trans presence in our city. I also created an audioscape that goes with it, where the people that I photographed talk about their experiences in public space and their dreams for an ideal city. And so that website is Safe in Public Space, and you can see the monuments, you can hear the audioscape, you can get more information. So yes, Emmett is available for streaming. It starts being available for streaming on February 19th, so this Friday. Okay. Oh, maybe Zadie, I already asked your question. Okay, answer your question. Great.
D-I-F-N.
Hi, do you have a question?
His name is Noah.
Hi, yes, it is going to be streamed on the CBC
Nine.
Gem.
2002.
Do you have a question? Okay, maybe we'll come back. Yeah, so it is going to be streamed on CBC Gem. And for folks who are watching from the United States, I have to figure out how to make sure that it's accessible but to folks streaming from the States. But it will be on the CBC app, and so you can watch it there. Yeah, and I'm very excited about, again, this opportunity to tell a bit of a different story, to tell a story about a disabled hero who survives. You know, there's a line in the play where he says, you know, against all odds and in the most unlikely of ways, I survived the fall, the virus to end all viruses. And so he is there and is one of the survivors and is able to be there for this day when everything changes, when something happens very dramatic that makes everything different. So I'm really excited to tell a story about a disabled future, about a Black disabled future where we've survived this, where we get to be living long enough to become elders, where we made it. So I'm really excited. Hi, Black Crip. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to showing that. So that'll be available as of February 19th. And you can check it out on CBC Gem. And there's more information there. Yeah, so I'm really excited about that. Lastly, I'll just say I also work as a curator, and one of the curatorial projects that I'm working on right now is a project called Wild Seed Black Arts Fellowship. And it's this Black Arts Fellowship that's interdisciplinary and will bring together a whole bunch of different Black artists to learn and skills build and practice across different disciplines for 20 months. So there'll be 7 distinct residency periods and 20 workshops. And so as a curator and as the designer of that program, I'm really looking forward for the chance to mentor and support Black artists who are looking for their next moves in their career and their practice. And I think as curators, we can, you know, support Black artists in these particular ways by, you know, supporting and profiling their work. So I'm really looking forward to that. So that's the Wild Seed Black Arts Fellowship. You can find out more about that at the wildseedcenter.ca website. How old was I when I wrote my first play? I actually started writing as a young person. As a kid, we were always making plays. We would always, while the grown-ups were upstairs talking, the cousins would go downstairs and we'd come up with these performances that we would do for the grown-ups, and they had to be the audience, and they we would sort of do that. I think I wrote my first actual play I started writing my first play when I was in my 20s, but the first play that was performed really would have been Antarctica. Up until that point, I was mostly working in performance art. So I wrote my own performances and wrote countless performances from my 20s and my 30s, but it wasn't until I was in my 40s that I wrote a proper sort of play with distinct scenes and actors that were sort of hired into play, and that would have been Antarctica. But yeah, I've been writing my own sort of solo performances, mostly in the realm of performance art, often talking about the experience of madness and telling humorous stories about being a psych survivor and what my experiences have been. And so yeah, I think, but it really started at 4 or 5 and 6 and 7, when we were trying to keep ourselves occupied while the grown-ups were talking. We would go and make up these plays, and I see my daughter doing it now, wanting to make up plays and wanting to create stuff. She'll go off in her room and sort of come back with a performance, and I hope she gets excited to want to explore her creativity as an adult as well. But yeah, I think that, one of the nice things is that you could write your first play play at any age. At 80, you could write your first play. So if anyone is out there who's sort of struggling to get it down, just keep going. Just write yes, 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 yes all over the page until it starts to flow. And whenever it comes, and it'll be the right time. Any other questions? Yeah, I'm definitely very committed to Black queer futurity. I really want to help create a world, help us imagine a world. So if Walida Amarisha says that activism is speculative fiction because we're daring to dream that another world is possible, artists who are infusing their work with a creative activism, we are helping to literally paint the picture of what that dared dream looks like, what it is that we're dreaming into being. And Emmett and Antarctica and Ancestors Do You Read Us, are these opportunities to say what we're dreaming into being is a world where we make it, where we survive this. Right now the conditions are not currently set up for us to survive this. And that's why we're trying to change the conditions through activism, through creation, through all sorts of things, through lobbying, through whatever we do. But yeah, we're definitely in a moment now where change is coming, change is here, change is possible. And so creating works that help us to inspire believing that we can change the world is essential. Tony K. Bambara in 1982 or 1983 said that the role of the artist from the oppressed or marginalized community was to make the revolution irresistible. So that's what I've tried to do through my creative practice, is to make these irresistible revolutions, these revolutions that seem so doable, so possible, that these artworks that inspire us to say, oh, actually we could totally change this or that or this or that, or these things that are no longer serving us, we could change them, and we could make things so much better for so many of us. So making the revolution irresistible and following in this Tony K. Bambara line of thinking is a big part of my practice. So part of that is we have to start to imagine, what does a Black queer crip futurity look like? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What is it like? And then start to try to build it. Yes, thank you. Yeah, it's so nice to have books for kids. I'm really excited about teaching and sharing information through a broad range of ages. So that book, I Promise, that was created with Catherine Hernandez, tells a story of also about, future families. It tells the story about all of these different ways that we create our families together. So, for example, she's getting ready for her pajamas and she's trying to delay bedtime. So she says, and Cam from dance class, what about him? Like, how did his family get made? Cam came from a promise that monsters do not belong under beds and ladders sometimes feel like mountains, especially when you're learning to climb them for the first time. And you have this parent sort of looking under the bed, and I drew these as large scale drawings and then colored them digitally. And, Frances came from a promise to teach a child to love her body, so these are these beautiful future offerings where we get to imagine all of the different beautiful ways that our families are created, told through this child who is trying to delay bedtime, which is, I think, for anyone who's a parent out there, a very familiar process. And so I'm so thankful to Catherine for writing this book and for inviting me to illustrate it. I got to illustrate a couple of children's books. I got to illustrate Bridge of Flowers, which is a book written by Leah Lakshmi Pyapsya Samarasina, which is put out by Flamingo Rampant Press, and tells the story about a BIPOC family where there's a divorce, there's a separation that's happened, and both parents, one is a witch and one is a scientist, and they both have this bridge of flowers that connects their two tree houses that they live in, these accessible little tree houses, and the parents don't speak to each other very much, and the kids sort of have to figure out a way to save this bridge because it's being overharvested. Anyways, it tells a story about, again, a disabled future. It tells a story about real life, like families that are living across two houses, which is my experience too. And it tells a story about this Crip family that has a non-binary parent and a femme parent, and anyway, so it's just this beautiful story that Leah created, and I'm so thankful to places like Flamingo Rampant for telling these alternative stories. And then lastly, I wrote, and illustrated the book Love is in the Hair, also for Flamingo Rampant, which is about dreadlocks, about Black love, about these queer uncles who are watching their nibbling on the night that the nibbling sibling is about to be born in the hospital. So the parents are off having the baby or at the birthing center or wherever, and the uncles are there, and the kid can't sleep, and it's like, well, you tell me stories. So he starts telling the stories about all of the pieces of fabric and beads and stuff that are in his dreadlocks, and then until she falls asleep. And it's this ability to sort of tell a story about a working class family, where they live in an apartment and the uncles are sleeping on a pull-out couch, not in a fancy separate bedroom. It tells the story of these Black gay uncles, who are just kind of part of the story and not the subject. And, it also tells a story about Black hair, Black love, Black joy. And so that story is called Love is in the Hair. And actually, this is the original sketch tacked up on my studio wall of the cover. So if anybody has seen the cover of Love is in the Hair, it's red, but this is the original sketch that was of it, and it's actually a dreadlock with the beads in it, in a hair. Sorry, in a heart shape. So that was through Flamingo Rampant. So I'm very thankful to queer presses and presses that want to support telling stories for intergenerational families. So yes, this video will be available to watch later on the Instagram TV on this site, so you'll be able to click and watch it again. And I hope that you've enjoyed exploring my practice today. Again, if you're just tuning in, my name is Syrus Marcus Ware. I'm an artist, an activist, a scholar, an educator, a parent, an organizer based in Toronto in Northern Turtle Island or Canada. And I work across a variety of different mediums and disciplines, exploring Black activist culture, exploring revolutionary ideas, exploring the possibility that we could make the revolution irresistible, as Tony K. Bambara encourages us to do, that we could imagine speculative futures, that we could help people to make the conceptual leap to making the change that needs to happen in the world, to touch the change, as Octavia Butler tells us to do. So it's been a pleasure to get to share my practice with you today. It's been a pleasure to get to talk to you about my work. I'll just leave you with an image here of some of the portraits that I've created through the Activist Portrait Series. Just as we close out, I love to end on some images of organizers and activists. So these are just some of the 45 portraits that I've created over the last couple of years. Again, activists organizing across this northern part of Turtle Island, a couple of folks in the States here. So Kona and Addis in Hampton, and Dainty and Keisha and Al Farouk and Troy and Maria and Josh and Melissa and Omi Sheree and Rodney and Tandy and Kim and Melissa and Queen Titi Opaleki. Thank you for your work, and thank you for your labor, and thank you for all that you're doing. So yeah, a big shout out to all the activists and change makers in the world, and a big shout out to all the artists who are bringing essential creativity to our movements and to our activisms. So yeah, thank you so much for tuning in and for joining me today. You can watch this video on IGTV here on this site, and you'll be able to watch it. So thanks again so much for having me. I'm going to sign off for today. I'm again signing off for you to you from Toronto, from the part where the trees stand in the water, the part that was underwater at the time of the Toronto Purchase. Thank you again to the Mississaugas of the Credit for the chance to gather and to talk to you from these territories. Thanks again to Ikouii for having me and for the chance to share my work with you today. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, and let's take care of each other.